Good morning. Good morning, Teresa. And I'm so glad that you've been able to join me this morning. You are one of the people that I have great admiration for in the industry. I've read your book. I've taken one of your programs. I've been a participant on some of the EBC calls. And I know that there is a wealth of information that you have to share. And as a fellow upcoming author, I would love to get your perspective on a couple of things. And maybe we could even start, just for those of you that haven't met yet, Teresa de Grosbois, the author of the best-selling book, Mass Influence. Maybe you could share just a little bit about how you got started as an author, because this book interview really is about how to leverage language, and that's the focus of my upcoming book. So can you talk a little bit about yourself for a change?
You know, I'd love to tell you it was this beautiful linear path that was all neat and tidy, and it was truthfully anything but. You know, I've always had this thought in my heart since I was a kid that one day I might be an author. And then life happens, right? And we start working for a living, and we start making a good career, and family and other priorities start getting in the way. And, you know, what actually happened was I took a couple courses that had me start thinking about who do I really want to be in the world. And someone gave me a copy of a book called The Passion Test to read by Janet Attwood. I'm a huge fan of Janet Attwood. She's now a dear friend of mine. And it talks about leaning in, you know, that if there's something in your heart and something you'd be rather doing, even if you spend just a few minutes every day moving toward that goal, your life will slowly start to shift. And sure enough, that actually has been my path. You know, 20 years ago, I couldn't have envisioned my life as it is now. It would have been well beyond anything I could have imagined, that I might be an international speaker traveling all over the world, speaking on big stages, that I might get to lead an organization as awesome as the Evolutionary Business Council. None of those things were even in the realm of what I could consider as a possibility for myself. And yet, if you continue to take the next logical step, as I did, you know, what's in front of you that's closer to your passion and closer to your dream than where you are now, it's amazing where your life will take you.
Lovely. Well, I know that I started reading the book, and within probably the first three lessons, I guess they are, that you shared, started making some connections and connections for other people, and some wonderful things have evolved from that. So I know that the content that you've shared in your book has been incredibly valuable for me personally, and so I thank you for putting that book together. I have heard you speak as well at a couple of different events now, and welcome the opportunity to gather some insights. So as far as this interview, what I was hoping to do was to explore some of the concepts around language. And I know from being also on your mailing list that you've popped a few times recently, popped some very intriguing blog items in front of me, and it's been around language. And that's the purpose and the passion of what I'm currently working on, my project, which is the book that's due out this fall. I'm lovingly calling it, with a working title of Word Power, which is not the actual title, but Word Power. And it's about the art of having more powerful conversations, more confident conversations. And it's intended specifically for women. So I know that in the past 7 years in particular, when I've been working as an executive coach with women, nothing really had surprised me more than how easily it is for women to get knocked off base, to lose their confidence. So part of the reason behind the book is to knit together the experiences that I had early in my career working in sales with psychology and working in human resources and leadership for 15 years, plus executive coaching over the last 7 years. I mean, I've interviewed and hired about 6,000 people, asked thousands and thousands of questions, and noticed when people start to drop in their confidence level, you can literally see the energy drain out of them.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
what I was hoping to inquire today is, what has been some of your biggest lessons around language and confidence, and
Well, I
how
love
maybe,
that you
one
talk.
or two words in particular might be the words that either infuse your confidence and pick you right up, or knock you off base.
Yeah, I love that you talk about it as language in addition to just words, because language starts with words. Everything starts with word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our word is our ability to create, right? Because until we can create something in word, there's no vision, there's nothing to pull yourself towards. So language is just so important to who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there is more to communication than just words. There's who are you being when you're speaking those words.
Yeah.
And I like to talk about that as authenticity. One of the reasons I wrote Mass Influence was that I see a lot of good people, everyday heroes, really get tripped up by their own negative self-talk when it comes to moving into leadership or moving into influence to really try and create change, whether the change is in their community, their organization, or the world at large.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good people out there that would leave a legacy and create a better world. And the very thing that they most need, which is inner knowing and inner confidence around moving forward, is being tripped up by their own negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, when it comes down to it, the more meaningful something is to you, the closer it is to your own dreams, to really contribute, to really make a difference in the world, the scarier it will be to you. Because, your dreams are scarier to you than they are to anyone else on this planet, because they're your dreams, right? and so that will really flare your inner dialogue. And yet at the same time, there's no one better hardwired on this planet to live your own dreams than you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to be more committed, more passionate, more engaging. And that actually goes a long way in language, in communication, to having people get enrolled and want to follow you where you want to lead.
Absolutely. And I echo those comments. I did, just thinking, probably about 4 years ago, started working specifically with a coach, international coach, on energetic resonance, because that whole piece about authenticity, yes, I was showing up confidently, I was showing up powerfully. However, there's that fine line between being aggressive and assertive. And I think that I had actually tripped over into being aggressive. I was striving more than I was showing up confidently, authentically. And over the past 4 years, doing quite a lot of work, deep diving into, what are my cornerstones, and what am I really passionate about, and what do I want to take a stand for? So important to authenticity.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. And it's one that is shared throughout humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, our inner dialogue trips us up in that fine line between confidence and aggression.
Yeah.
Because as soon as there's some fear-based conversation going on here, confidence tips over into, I'm going to frickin' kill you kind of energy. Right. And it's true. Especially, women often fall into this end of the spectrum. It happens for men too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually your inside voice is seeping into the outside voice, right? Which is why I talk about authenticity so much in my book and when I'm speaking, because there's a lot of different definitions of authenticity out there. Here's mine. Authenticity is your inside voice, and same thing is your outside voice.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of the best things you can do for yourself is come to peace with your inner dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I don't mean trying to get rid of your inner dialogue. Don't shame yourself for it. Your negative self-talk was invented by a much younger version of you. A lot of research is showing now that most people invent their dominant negative self-talk, because we all have a theme to ours. But we generally invent it at the very earliest stages of learning language. I love that we're talking about language today. In the very first failures of our lives, right? I can actually remember the moment I created my most significant negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not just Canadian. I'm from Northern Canada. I'm from Northern Ontario, and we used to spend our summers in a remote backwoods cabin. We'd go in by boat every year just in time to see the hatching of the little baby mosquitoes.
Lovely.
Canadian humor for any Americans listening. And you know, my siblings became very important to me. I'm the youngest of 9, so they became my whole world because they were the only people to play with, and I was the youngest, you know. So I often found myself in scenarios of, you know, begging for them to wait or needing to keep up. And I remember one day we were just home from the cabin, and everyone was crowded into our tiny little kitchen. All my cousins were there, and everybody's buzzing with excitement because my grandmother's taking us all to the movies, which is in my family a huge frickin' deal. Mm-hmm. And I look across the room just in time to see my mom say, "Teresa can't go, she's too little." And 3-year-old me is utterly devastated in that moment. And to make it all make sense, I decide I'm too small to play with the big kids. And like a lot of human beings, I then start doing one of two things. You know, I start desperately trying to prove that that inner dialogue is not true, or I spend my time desperately terrified that it is.
Right.
And that tends to happen to all of us, right? We have some theme that we created as a young child. And, you know, the really cool thing about your inner dialogue is it's neither good nor bad. Some people call it negative self-talk, but some people call it mind viruses. But, you know, I'm too small to play with the big kids actually became a major motivator in my life. Go figure that I should become an expert on influence and have a book that's a #1 international bestseller in 7 countries, right? And has remained on the bestseller list for 2 years, right? Because importance became an important conversation to me at the age of 3. So, you know, a big part of this, a big part of learning confidence and confidence in language and how to become authentic and come to peace with your inner dialogue is to really look at what is that dominant theme that keeps cropping up to you, and really learn to thank your inner child for creating that as much as you need to learn to manage that. Because that little inner child inside you is really just trying to protect you, trying to make sense of the world. And they created a major motivator in your life that's probably had you do some pretty cool things with your career.
Yeah. Well, certainly I can, and I thank you for sharing that story. I have heard pieces of that story before, but it always touches me because I think about, you know, some of the self reflections that I've done over the past few years, and you know, there's certainly 3 examples of things that had knocked my confidence, and one of them came about doing a mirror exercise and seeing myself as a little baby on the steps of my mum's front porch in a pram with this cat net on top of the pram to prevent the neighbor's cat from coming and pawing at me while I was there, you know, sitting in the sunshine. And the cat did come, and the cat landed on my chest, and feeling that there's no way that I can cry out, because if I cry out, he actually will see me and potentially start scratching at me. And yet at the same time, if I didn't cry out, then no one would know that the cat was there. And so this dilemma started very, very early on, and continued on through, you know, age 6, when I think it was actually 5, when I did this beautiful painting, and my dad trashed it and said it was no good. And you know, the story continues. Anyway, there's lots of reasons why I'm writing this book, culminating in being 11, and my dad telling me that I would never ever be successful in life. Yeah. Thanks, Dad. I'm 11. Right? Yeah. And so that one sentence actually pushed me forward, but it was a push, not a pull. It was a striving energy. And that was where I lived for the next 20 plus years. So rebranding this in this last couple of years with the branding of Flourish, which is the new business, is really shifting the energy from a push to a pull. And it's a lovely place to be. Yeah. So, and that's such a common, like a lot of people have inner dialogues in that realm. Like little tiny Yvonne probably created an inner dialogue of, is it safe to speak? You know, with the cat sitting there, and that sort of that crunch moment dilemma of, I need to speak. Is it safe to speak? Well, go figure that you would become someone who is
passionate about helping people step into their confidence and passionate about talking about language, if you had an early driver of, is it safe to speak? You know, and so in a way it was, you know, that little infant you was trying to create a realm of how do I make sense of this? How do I protect myself?
Yep.
And at the same time created a beautiful motivator for you that A, trips you up sometimes, but B, really pushes you forward at other times. You know, so there is a wonderful journey of falling in love with that little inner child, so that inner dialogue becomes a wonderful force you use to motivate you, but not the thing that's driving the bus. You know, because there are moments when it's not safe to speak, or I'm too small to play with the big kids, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not good at speaking in public, or whatever your inner dialogue might be. It'll flare up and try and run the show. And the main thing is you always want to have your higher consciousness, your intuition, your more connected centers. We call that whole brain thinking. You want to have that running the show, not some self-talk you invented at the age of 2 or 3.
Yeah. Well, when I did do the inner work on my cornerstones, you know, grounding myself in how I make decisions based on those core elements of myself has certainly made it a lot easier. So thinking about the words that trip us up, any other thoughts about, you know, 1 or 2 words perhaps that either you've in your own life experience found that trip you up or trigger you, or where you've seen it working with some of your clients perhaps? Is there 1 or 2 words
I would say if there's one skill people can learn, it's to recognize that we have a beautiful paradox in language, and this actually exists in almost every culture, which is the distinction between the word and but.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the same person using the word but will interpret the word differently depending on whether they're saying it or hearing it. And you may notice this, but when we say the word but, we tend to mean, I agree with what was just said and I'm making a clarifying statement. When we hear the word but, we tend to hear that person just dismissed everything I just said. The but just canceled everything I just said. Now they're asserting a whole new point of view.
Right.
And if you can get sensitized to that and start noticing that when you say but, it very obviously means I'm just making a clarifying point. And when you hear but, it very obviously means that person just dismissed everything I say. Then you start getting sensitized to the fact that this paradox exists in language. And it exists almost ubiquitously, whether we're talking about the English language, French, Spanish, Asian languages have this issue too. So really start to notice that and work to replace the word but with the word and.
Yeah.
If you can start saying, I agree with what you just said, and we should also consider blah, 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 blah. It's a lot more powerful in communication. You'll have a lot less breakdown.
Well, it's interesting because that is actually one of the pieces I've written in the book. So perhaps I can quote you now in the book around that word, because you've taken it a little bit deeper. For me, but is yes, it's definitely a separator. You know, I loved the fact that you have, you know, I love that dress. Simple thing for women, right? I love that dress. You know, but blah 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 blah. It would look better in black, whatever it is. And no one hears the first part of the sentence anymore. It's like you've put a period in the middle of the sentence, and very often, yes, it is a criticism or heard as a criticism. And I was at a speakers event just recently where we had a number of highly trained speakers, and it still really surprised me because what was being shared was but in the middle of in the middle of the room, in the middle of the sentence, talking to somebody across the room and clearly identifying what came across as a criticism. And if only they had replaced that word with and, it would have had such a different energy around it, because I believe that words have energy. And so thank you for sharing that example. Is there one particular word perhaps that boosts your confidence or that has a positive impact? Oh,
I love that question. You know, I I think for me, one of the words that really grounds and center me is actually the word peace.
Mm.
My vision statement for my life is that I live in a world of balance and peace.
Mm.
And so I often joke about that I live a balanced life of imbalance, because like a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes my life gets absolutely crazy and I've got 4 cities in 2 weeks and I'm trying to fit it all in and I've got online stuff and then I have to reground myself and recenter myself and remember to breathe and get my energy back in sync. Often I'm phoning a colleague in EBC saying, I'm really out of whack right now. Can you help me get recentered and regrounded?
Yeah.
And for me, the word peace is like an anchor in my life to say, okay, there are moments when coming back to peace means coming back to clarity and seeing what's next for you.
Lovely. And certainly for me, my sort of downloaded universal guidance was, in terms of a mission statement, is to uplift the spirit of humanity, which sounded at the time like this massive vision that I had no clue how I was going to achieve it. However, one step at a time, and just having an opportunity to think about it from the standpoint of creativity and compassion, because those are 2 of my cornerstones. And by living into what is possible through creativity, it helps to look at something that comes at you that's unexpected, which for some people would be a challenge, a lesson, maybe considered a failure, and looking at it from a creative standpoint and saying, okay, so what else is out there? I'm refusing to believe that that is something that is going to stop me. So what else is a creative option to work around this? How can I be more compassionate with myself and say, this is not a failure, this is just an opportunity for learning. It's a lesson. It's a development, self-development growth area. And what can I do that will switch this up? If it's something that I'm floundering with, maybe I start giving that to someone else as a gift and seeing how they respond to it. And usually there's an opportunity to turn things around there as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So any other thoughts? I had booked this call for half an hour and I want to respect your time. And in the same vein, sometimes it's about not even about the words, but the word concepts. So for example, very often I use appreciative inquiry as an example of that, because I'm talking to a lot of women entrepreneurs. They're usually wanting to expand their business by having more sales. And they go to the meeting with this, what is your biggest challenge question to the clients, which very often I see the complete energy draining out of the person, because now they have to talk about this poor thing that is, or a decision that they made, a poor decision several months ago that's now resulted in this big challenge. And they literally drain right out in terms of their energy speaking about it. Whereas if they went with an appreciative inquiry approach of, what's working really well in your business right now and how could it be even better? It's a serving conversation as opposed to a sales dragging and kicking conversation. So any thoughts around word concepts like that? Maybe that.
Yeah, I love that. Appreciative inquiry is such a foundational principle to actually having influence. And, I would just encourage your viewers, all you out there watching, yes, you, really think about influence as though it's a skill. Because influence is anytime someone knows, likes, and trusts you enough to take action based on your word. You really want to treat influence like it's a core skill of you moving into leadership and having the ability to create positive change in the world. And when you think of it as a skill, don't think of it as something that's a huge time drain. Oh my God, I got to take on one more thing in my life. Influence is a lot more like breathing. There was a time during your life where you thought breathing was hard. You came out of that beautiful warm environment in your mother's womb and some idiot whacked you on the back and it hurt like heck and you cried for a moment and then you mastered the skill of breathing and you never thought about breathing again. You didn't go through the day thinking, oh my God, I got to breathe 24/7 today. Where will I find the time? Influence is a lot like that. And when you start to understand some of the basic principles and habits that the highly influential tend to use, you start to understand that your ability to lead and influence and cause change is as simple as breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And it will become like second nature to you. So, I highly encourage you to take on learning this. We actually give the digital version of my book away for free. Do you mind if I mention that, Yvonne?
No, please do, because
Beautiful.
I've been sending people to the link to get to that freebie. So please do.
Thank you. Yeah, if you come to massinfluencethebook.com, we actually have a 30-day influence challenge you can take, which is a complimentary program. It's just 30 days of like building your muscle. We like to teach you the skill of influence by having you do it. They're little 1-minute exercises you do every day. And we'll send you to all the links where you can get the digital version of our book, Mass Influence, for free, if that inspires you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is so generous. And I know for me, I think what's really resonated as I was reading through the book is something that I was doing naturally anyway, which was wanting to share knowledge and be that sort of conduit of information, and share with somebody a tip, a video, a TED talk, or a connection. And in the Mass Influence book, being more conscious about sharing those connections has certainly led to some wonderful things unfolding in my life. So thank you so much for writing that book. And hopefully when my book is coming out this fall as well, that it'll have the same impact as readers go through and realize if I just shifted,
I think it's going to be amazing.
Well, if I just shifted one word, how I could be perceived differently, or how I would feel differently, because a lot of it, one of my last interviews was talking about self-talk, and that is such an important piece too to how we show up. So it's been lovely talking with you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we log off? I said I know that your time is valuable.
I would just say, give yourself permission to lean into your dreams, because until you take action around your dreams, you are just dreaming. And life is a whole lot sweeter when you start to really focus on doing stuff that you love and enjoy.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and certainly with Teresa's comments as well, with your permission, to air this video as a lead up to the launch and even quote you in the book. That would be lovely. So hopefully I have your permission to do that.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Yvonne.
Great. Have a lovely day, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.